What up?
What's up, dude?
What's going on?
Dude, I was like really entranced by that music just now. I got kind of, I got like totally lost.
Dude, they changed it from this other music that they used to have.
It was this sounded like a Phil Collins like demo.
Dude, yeah, like one of the lost tracks. Like something
Yeah,
that didn't make the album.
yeah. Like he kind of started and he's like, and scrapped it, but it has the vibe still.
It had that vibe, yeah. Dude, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Chilling. Watched a shitload of movies last few weeks, and mostly in preparation for this. Watched some other stuff. Been reading a lot. I'm about to finish. I'm gonna finish Song of Susanna tonight.
Dude, you're that close to being done?
I've been ripping through Song of Susanna. Yeah,
Fuck, dude. I hate
really,
you.
really good.
Big Rod is in the house. What's up, dog?
What's up, Rod?
Yeah, dude. Welcome back to Talks from the Shelf, episode 9.
Wow,
We've almost done 10 of these.
that's crazy. Oh, I have to do something like. Oh, we already know what we're doing for the next one.
Oh yeah,
We'll-
we do, don't we? I
we'll do it
forgot
up.
for a second.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the practical effects show. Do you want to tell the people kind of like how this idea came about?
I don't remember.
It was your idea. You
I
suggested it.
maybe because I've been. This might have been just my way of getting you to watch Neverending Story. Might have been like the main thing that drove it to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably how it started.
The catalyst for a lot of these shows is you and I just kind of trying to find an excuse to make the other person watch some movies that we've been wanting the other person to watch for a long time.
Yeah.
With like the Is It a Masterpiece show, that was just straight up me being like, yo, these are like 5 movies that I would love to talk to you about. And then we just kind of use this show as an excuse to talk about them, which
Yeah,
is I'm loving it.
Yeah, it like holds us accountable, because it's one thing to be like, yo, you should watch this movie, and it's like, all right, like,
Yeah, and I'm like,
all
yeah,
right,
I'll get around to it.
eventually.
Big Rod. Yeah, as a dude. So we're gonna talk a lot about 80s today.
Yeah.
So I figured we'd wait a little bit and let some more people join. And then I'll play my little intro, and then we'll kind of go through what we're gonna be doing tonight. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and roll the intro.
Dude, I just Neverending Story is so batshit crazy that like just like seeing those shots real quick, I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, out of context, it's pretty wild.
Even in context, it's still pretty insane.
All right, so the way this is gonna work is Tyler and I each assigned the other person 3 movies to watch, and my suggestions were all horror movies that Tyler hadn't seen, and Tyler recommended me 3 fantasy movies that I had not seen, all of which utilize practical effects as well as visual effects. But they all use practical effects in different ways, and we're going to kind of give our thoughts on each movie. And I still don't even know how Tyler feels about some of these. He kind of gave me his initial reactions, but tonight we're going to get into it. So, but first, before we get into any of the actual movies, I thought it would be important to kind of lay the groundwork for all the things that we're going to be looking at specifically as far as practical effects. Just to kind of give some context and really just show like how far we've come, you know, because we've come a long way since like the beginning of cinema, basically. So, the first I call these the 8 core pillars of practical effects. Totally just coined that myself tonight. The first one is matte painting. Matte painting is a technique where artists create or enhance backgrounds for films and other visual media by painting, digitally manipulating, or combining images to create realistic or fantastical scenes, often used to extend or replace images in a shot. Animatronics, pretty self-explanatory. These are just kind of like robots. Think of like Chucky is basically just one animatronic. Prosthetics, this is basically, you know, your makeup effects more or less, to kind of create an umbrella term. Stop motion, this is like Wallace and Gromit, basically, if you're familiar with Wallace and Gromit. So it's basically just the very tedious act of moving things. Usually it's made out of clay, like claymation or something, right? But it could be anything. And they move something ever so slightly, then they take a picture of it, and then they move it again very slightly, take a picture of it, and they repeat that process, and it creates the effect of stop motion. Forced perspective, this is most prominently used, I think, in the pop culture zeitgeist, in like the Lord of the Rings. That's probably the one thing most people will know it from. And the beauty of forced perspective, if it's done right, is that you don't even realize that it's there. Like if you didn't know any better and you watched like the Fellowship of the Ring, you would just assume that like Elijah Wood and them were like 4 feet tall, if it's done right. And then miniatures are pretty self-explanatory. It's when they take things that would not be feasible to build otherwise, and then they make them like 1/16th scale or whatever it is, and you know, they film it in a certain way, and it helps them to create that sort of that gives it that production value without actually having to build a castle or blowing up a truck, right? Something like that. Pyrotechnics, this is just explosions basically, and sets is pretty self-explanatory. It's just the act of and I almost didn't even want to include this one, but after I thought about it, I was like, you know what, sets are kind of like, we don't like, that's not a given anymore, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of things are filmed on a blue screen, or that thing, the volume that they're using now.
Yep.
Big Rod says, I don't know if it's because I was there as a kid or not, but 80s fantasy was so much better than what kids get today. We had bangers: Little Monsters, Never Ending Story, Princess Bride, Flight of the Navigator. Yeah, dude.
Little Monsters, wow.
Yeah, that Hobbit's house scene with Gandalf was bonkers. Yeah, dude. Tyler sent me a really cool video that we'll touch on a little bit, as
That
far
shit
as like
blew-
how they filmed that shit, dude. It blew my mind.
Yep.
So these are our 8 core tenets: matte painting, animatronics, prosthetics, stop motion, forced perspective, miniatures, pyrotechnics, and sets. Obviously, there's other things as well that go into it, but these are kind of the big. And there's a lot of things that fall under these as well. So you could make like, you know, hyphens and add a lot to this. But these are kind of the things that I've found that really make up what practical effects are. So I want to show a clip real quick from a film called The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots by Alfred Clark from the year 1895.
What?
Hey, Tiana, what's up? So this is one of the earliest examples of a film that used practical effects to achieve an illusion, you know, something for narrative purposes.
Oh, I know. I think I know what this is actually. Okay.
Yeah, you might have come across some of these in your own research. What's up, Old Restless? How you doing, bro? All right, so I'm going to show this clip real quick. Tell me if you spot the effect.
Dude, it's easy for us to see now, but like 130 years ago, that all of that was so foreign that like I'm sure like very few people were like, "Oh, that's where they changed the shots." Like nobody understood what the fuck that was.
No, because movies in general were so new. So,
Yeah.
yeah, obviously that, you can tell what they did there. They stopped the frame and threw a dummy in there and cut the dummy's head off, right? Odd Harsh, what's up,
Yeah.
man?
Yo, what's good, Otters? This is my boy from work.
Oh, nice. How you doing, man? Good to see you. So like obviously, yeah, like Tyler said, we are, conditioned, right, to where we see something like that and it just looks kind of goofy. But you have to think about at the time when movies in general. Imagine being Avatar to Victorian child.
Dude, they might die. Like they might go
Yeah.
completely insane.
No, yeah, they would alter their brain chemistry. So I'm glad you guys are seeing what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
So the next clip I want to show you guys is from a Charlie Chaplin movie called Modern Times from 1936. And I'll just show you that real quick.
Mm-hmm. This shit blew my mind too.
So this would be, if I'm not mistaken, an example of forced perspective.
I want to say forced perspective, and is this not like
I think
is
this
not
also
considered
is
a matte painting?
I think this would also be a matte painting. So the cool thing about this is that you can take all these effects and you can combine them.
Dude, that clip looks so good too.
It does. It really does. Eric's here. What's up, bro? How you doing, man?
It's goody, sir.
So yeah. And then we also have to kind of talk about A Trip to the Moon, George Méliès. I don't have any clips or anything, but it's that iconic image of the moon with like a rocket in its eye. George Méliès was like, he was a legitimate magician. Like he started out just kind of like doing magic tricks, and then he got into film because he thought it could help his act, like how make like do better magic.
You're saying he had
and
actual magic powers? Is that what you're saying?
he was a warlock. No, he was a legitimate like street magician back when that was like a legitimate profession. If you guys have seen The Prestige from Chris Nolan, just a straight up thing like that, like it was such a viable thing. Like everyone was wanting to see, like that was entertainment back then. So he discovered like a lot of different techniques that are used. And A Trip to the Moon from 1902, by the way. 1902. Thinking about that year is insane. Hold on a sec.
It sounds like Mark has somebody knocking at his door, or one of the dogs scratching at his door. I guess we'll find out.
Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, George Méliès discovered all these different things. He popularized techniques such as substitution splices, which is just straight up like pausing the film, changing something in the frame, and then pressing play again, essentially, so that it creates the effect of like something appeared out of nowhere. Multiple exposure, which is like, if I'm not mistaken, that's like having they would like cover one side of the camera, and you would have something going on this side, and then you'd be able to kind of replicate it on the other side, and then you would play it back, and it would create like a seamless image. So you could have like two of the same person in the frame.
I think for those, it was literally like back when you're literally like they would cover some of the frames, and it literally doesn't get hit with light when they film.
Yeah,
and they still have a piece of like that, which is so weird that it's like physical. They're talking about physical film and like light, and then they would go and film something else, cover the rest of it.
It's all done in camera, and
so
that's
insane.
So that's the big thing about what makes something a practical effect. And I think the big, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the big delineation you can make is that if something is done in camera, meaning it's captured on the day and it's all physically happening right there, that is a practical effect. And then a visual effect is something that's done in post-production. Can we make that sort of hard line in the sand, or is there anything like any exceptions that I may be missing?
Yeah, I was just reading and watching something earlier on practical effects versus visual effects versus CGI. And
Mm.
yeah, it's that even like visual, like some practical effect stuff might fall into visual effects if you have to then like essentially as soon as you go and combine something, even if it's like compositing shots, that ends up being a visual effect. So like a double exposure might technically be a visual effect.
Yeah, I could see
Stop
that
motion
for
is
sure. Yeah.
stop motion also kind of a visual effect. I don't know. Like it's a little blurry.
It becomes a hybrid, right? Because you can
Yeah.
take a practical effect and you can augment it with visual effects.
Right.
You're taking something that was done practically on the day in camera, and then you're augmenting it and combining it with further techniques to further sell the illusion, right?
Yep.
So George Méliès's contribution to just film in general cannot be understated, particularly his contributions to effects work and all that stuff. I'm going to show another clip real quick. This is the Dorothy and her sepia twin. So basically what happens here is it's the beginning of The Wizard of Oz, and they had the ability to shoot in color at this point. So the movie starts out in sepia, which is kind of just like brown and white. It's like black and white, but just everything's kind of brown.
And that's like the first 10 or 15 minutes or like that.
Yeah.
This is like 10 or 15 minutes into the film is this shot.
Yeah. So when she makes the transition to Oz, in order to really sell the effect, what they do is I'll just show it. And then, so tell me, basically there's two Dorothys here. And, when you're watching, tell me if you can see when the fake Dorothy and the real Dorothy kind of switch places here.
I love that.
Crazy, right? So basically what they did was it cuts to a certain frame, and the door frame itself is painted sepia tone, and then the Judy Garland double is also painted, like wearing a dress and everything is painted sepia. And then she steps out of the frame, and then the real Judy Garland steps into the frame, thus creating that effect as if she's going from sepia to color. So just a super practical solution to a problem that they didn't even really have to do. That's the thing about a lot of this stuff, is that like it's all just kind of things that were like, wouldn't it be cool if we did this,
dude? And like this is Wizard of Oz was the first color film.
It was,
so, like,
wasn't it?
So that scene is the first time that people were like in the theater and saw color. And like the fact that they took that much time to like set up the beginning of the movie like that and like really make it a thing of like, all right, like now, because I'm sure like people heard like, oh, this movie's in color, and you go and you watch the first 10 minutes of it and you're like, nah, this is just brown. And then
it's just brown.
And then you get into Oz and it's like insanely very rich and colorful, and like it would have been insane.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't understate how cool that would have been to audiences back then. And then I just want to shout out, obviously we have Wizard of Oz, King Kong from 1931.
The stop motion one?
Yeah. Crazy, in terms of, what a monster movie can be. Godzilla as well, the first Godzilla out of Toho. yeah, like this was all just ingenuity, and it's something that we're losing, I think, today. But it's being replaced by other things, so it's not like people aren't still people aren't just like coming up with things, but there's something about this old stuff that just really hits. So King Kong, huge pioneer in stop motion. You also have Jason and the Argonauts from 1963 that also has a lot of really cool, like that whole movie is basically stop motion. And then 1968, we had 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Dude.
This is probably my favorite example of just sheer ingenuity. So I'll play this clip real quick.
We had to make a pen float in space close by William Sylvester, who was lying asleep in a seat. So we devised a rig, which was a large circular sheet of glass surrounded by steel and bearings so that we could rotate the sheet of glass. And then we had some double-sided tape, newly invented, and we put the pen on with the double-sided tape on the glass, and then we rotated the glass so it floated in space. The stewardess then was walking down the corridor between the seats, and she came up and grabbed hold of the pen.
Dude.
I mean, like, how crazy is that?
Dude, that whole movie, I saw that in theaters like 5 years ago before COVID.
Dude, I'm jealous.
And I obviously had heard about it, but had never seen it, didn't really know anything about it. And I, for the first like little bit, I was like almost worried that I was not watching what I thought I was watching. So I was like, there's no way that this is from, what is it from? The 60s?
1968, dude.
Because it still looks fantastic today.
Double-sided tape was just dude, yeah, it's what's up, Holland? How you doing?
Yeah, also what's up,
dude? Yeah, we went to the moon the next year in real life.
Dude, that's a whole can of worms. Yeah. Oh. Did we lose Mark or me? Oh man, let's see.
Hey guys. Lost internet briefly.
That was you, not me?
No, it was me.
That's a first.
Yeah, figures, right? All right, so where were we?
2001 absolutely looks beautiful still. It could come out now and look great.
Yeah, it's honestly insane how good that movie looks, and I need to watch it again, quite frankly.
Same. Yeah.
So that was a big one as far as innovation. And then the big one that was kind of like a watershed moment was Star Wars in 1977. They invented a lot of techniques for that movie that would later go on to become incredibly prominent. Lots of miniatures were used. Lots of, I think that's when, so Industrial Light and Magic was George Lucas's like visual effects company.
Created for the production of
Star Wars. And, you know, they just were so good at it that, you know, they wound up going on to do the effects work for a lot of films after that. So there's a big difference between where we were at before Star Wars and after Star Wars. It kicked the doors wide open as far as like what was possible. And then so from there we get into the 80s, which is where our kind of show begins, really. Because once the 80s begin, the doors are firmly open at this point, and horror movies in particular make use of a lot of these effects, because a horror movie is easier to make than something like Star Wars, and it's more likely to make money because it's a cheap investment, and so your return on investment is more likely to yield a higher return, basically. But so we're going to do our movies in chronological order. So Tyler had 3 fantasy films that he had me watch, and I had 3 horror films that I had Tyler watch. And we're doing these chronologically, so we'll start with Tyler's pick that he had me watch. We actually watched this together. Never Ending Story from 1984. I'll let you take it away with this one.
Dude, I was gonna. So this is Mark's first time seeing it.
Yes.
I've seen this a handful of times. This movie is just a fever dream. It's actually really beautiful. There's actually a lot of like meaning packed into it. There's also now a lot of like conspiracy theories around like what that meaning is, which I didn't realize until like a few weeks ago when somebody was telling me about that.
I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, it's like a whole thing. Great movie though. Lots and lots of practical effects, crazy prosthetics and makeup, and lots of matte paintings, which is something that I like I'd heard the term before and like had a initial understanding of like what that would be, but I think you actually pointed it out at some point when we were watching that, and you're like, oh, that's a sick matte painting, and I was like, oh, and then I went down like a crazy matte painting rabbit hole for a while after that. But yeah, we're gonna talk about a few things here, but I actually want to see, Mark, we never really fully talked about this much. What was your just initial impression? What were you thinking it was going to be, and like how was this relative to what you imagined it was going to be?
Yeah, Neverending Story was a movie. It's a movie that I've always been aware of. But like, I think I feel like this is the case with a lot of people. The movies that you watch when you're young are important for that reason. They're because you watch them when you're young, and they live on, with you as you age, and they can often inform your taste in movies. And the thing about this one was, I mean, I could easily see this being like a favorite of mine had I seen it when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, though, is like outside of like Blockbuster rentals, we don't really have a lot of control over what we watch as kids.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, when we were young, in the 90s, we didn't have a ton of like we didn't have a ton of control over what we saw, right? It was either something that you had at the house on tape, and that was just what you watched over and over again, or that you just didn't watch it, right? So this is something that I easily could have seen, but I just didn't. And so basically what I'm getting at is I didn't know if I would if it would really hit the same watching it as an adult. And if not for Tyler, this easily could have been a movie that I went the rest of my life without ever watching. I mean, really, because it's not often that you're ever finding yourself like, let me watch this movie that's essentially named for kids or made for kids. But that's not to say that an adult can't get anything out of it, but you just really have to be in the right mood, basically. And this movie's awesome. I really enjoyed watching it. I didn't quite know like where it was going at first, because it kind of just drops you in.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost has like a Princess Bride component to it, where it's, you're following a kid and he's reading the story, and there's that whole aspect of it. Uh, yeah, they would have had to name their band something else.
Betrayo.
But once I saw this, it was like filling in a puzzle piece that I had been missing for a while. Like as far as my knowledge of pop culture, because there's so many things that have referenced this movie throughout the years that I have seen, but I never understood any of the references. So now that I was watching it, I really was able to get a lot more out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me try to quickly run through like the big set piece effects.
Yeah, if you have notes, please feel free to take control here.
Yeah, I'm trying to run through because there's a lot, but yeah, and it's funny too because the movie, the first 10-15 minutes are super normal. It's just like a kid in like a random town in like middle America somewhere.
Mhm.
And then he goes to school, starts reading this book, and then he reads like the first few words, and it just drops you into a completely different setting. And there's like these crazy monsters, like these like really big, the big rock eater guy, this crazy dude on a snail, and this like goblin looking dude, a ghoul. And it's just completely tonally completely different than what it was before then. And most of the movie now takes place in that world in Fantasia. You hit this castle. That was it. That was the sick matte painting of
Yeah.
man, I forget the name of the castle. But it's a really dope castle. It's a very not like it's a very not classical castle at all. It's essentially just a huge tower. You get a quick shot on the tower of like on the top of the castle of like a crowd, but they're all like these really specific, very weird prosthetics on like do you remember that shot? And it's like there's a handful of people before Atreyu comes up and he's like, yo, like I'll come and do this quest. You have a shot of this crowd and they look insane and they only have like maybe 10 seconds of screen time, but they go really crazy, doing all this makeup. Atreyu goes on this quest. You get the shot in the swamp with Artax. They fabricated part of this swamp and then put a hydraulic lift in it. So Atreyu, your main guy, is riding a horse, and there is a part where like they get stuck. I don't want to spoil too much of the movie, but they get stuck in the mud, and so they literally. No,
yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows at this point. I'm the last one to see it, so
yeah, and so they like literally lowered this horse down into the water on a hydraulic lift. I don't know if the whatever the organization is that like protects animals on sets,
like PETA or something.
Yeah, I don't know if they were around yet, because like they do this, and I think part of why that scene works so well is because the horse looks so scared, like it's like bugging out, because it probably like literally like I imagine they had to like lock it in or something to the lift so it didn't like get up or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So this horse literally thinks that it's gonna get drowned. Not a great thing, but like that scene is insane.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because basically at the core of all of this, and it's going to be a recurring theme, and it's the reason why we do practical effects. Not only because for a very long time that was all you could do, but I guess it's the byproduct of it is the reality of it, the authenticity that you create, and where when you're making a film and you're making decisions and you have to be like, hey, how do we do this thing? And then the short answer is you will literally do the thing. Like you just have to do that, and you have to put people more or less in these situations. And that's why, like you said, it feels so real because it, for the most
ways
part,
it was, yeah,
in as many ways as possible, it was. So
yeah, there's a bunch of big creatures in it, and at the end, I love that shot where he gets to the nothing is like coming, and he thinks that he's about to like Atreyu is like hurt, and that like big like panther looking thing is like set into the shadows, and you just see his eyes, and he like kind of slowly comes out, and it's like very like it's not fooling anybody. You're never like, oh man, like this thing looks like a real giant panther. But there's just something about the fact that it's like there that I think like it being a physical thing, even though it's not hyper realistic, like allows my brain to like kind of treat it as if it's real. Where I'm like, okay, like I see Atreyu, I see this thing, they're both in this place together, and my brain is like, all right, cool. I'm gonna come back to that a lot later when we talk about Alice in Wonderland, because they break that rule constantly. But Neverending Story really sticks to like, okay, this doesn't look perfect, but it's all very cohesive, and it really kind of creates like a good glue that you really buy into the reality of it, even though the whole film is completely insane.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, right? Is it's like obviously it's such a fantastical film, but I think, and that's something that it's prevalent with movies that are made today, where you have all these additional resources where you can do like 70, 80, 90% of a movie all in post. And it just makes it feel less earned. The performances aren't as authentic because people are acting against a tennis ball.
Mhm.
It goes a long way towards getting a good performance out of people when there's actually something in front of them to act opposite to.
Yep.
So real quick, I want to shout out the special and visual effects were done primarily by this guy named Brian Johnson for this movie. He was the main figure responsible for the overall effects of the entire film, including the creatures and the fantastical elements. And then there's this guy, Joe Breda, who's the animatronics engineer. Francis Coates, he made a lot of the models. Vladimir Valak, sculptor and creature builder. Michael White was the supervisor for the cloud effects unit. So there was an entire unit that was working.
You kept calling those out. You were like, yo, these clouds look crazy.
The clouds in this movie look sick as fuck.
Yeah.
And then there's this guy, Giuseppe Tortora, another special effects artist who worked with Colin Arthur and his team. So basically, the reason I name all those names is because there were so many people who came together to do this. The Falkor.
Yeah, I don't know how I forgot Falkor. He's probably like the most iconic piece of imagery that has stuck from this movie, aside from like the Artax scene. And I mean, that thing is huge, huge animatronic. And I want to say like it was like 6 or 7 people to work him when he was like fully like his head and stuff was on camera. Yeah. And I feel like that, like Atreyu is what, like 12 or 13?
Yeah,
maybe 13.
Just a kid, yeah.
And I feel like having to have like a kid try to interact with something that wasn't like really actually there in front of him would not have worked as well as it does with like this giant, like he's really there with this gigantic dog dragon thing, and gets to interact with him, and like just really works. It's creepy. It's kind of like almost uncanny how like Falkor moves around and stuff, and like his voice, but yeah, it really works.
It feels like a dream.
Yeah.
My boy Josh that I work with, what's up, man?
Hey, Josh.
Yeah, like imagine Ripley from Alien, and there's that iconic scene where like the xenomorph is like in her face and she's like trying to get away from him.
If it was just a guy, like, all right, like be mad scared right now.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't work as well. Falkor is my dream dog. I'd need a bigger shovel though.
Dude, oh my god!
I guess you mean to bury him?
Nah, to pick up his poop is what I assumed.
Oh, that probably makes more sense. Okay,
both of those are tasks though, for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, man. Any closing thoughts on Neverending Story?
I guess the main takeaway that's relevant to this overall conversation is just that this movie is very imperfect, and a lot of it is like doesn't look super realistic, but one, that doesn't really matter because the style is consistent, and they're also very consistent in like how they do things that allows you to really buy into like the vision and like the reality, like allows you to buy into the reality of the world that the movie's making. There's some movies that at least I know I'm going to talk about later that do not do that. So yeah, Neverending Story creates very much like a cohesive vision, even though it's crazy.
Yeah, what's great about it is it doesn't spend a ton of time telling you things. It just shows it just shows you
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
It's the show don't tell practice where it's like, and that's the most effective world building, is where you are dropped into a world and it's telling you like, this is what's going on, these creatures exist, that they do this, sometimes they do that,
It's very realized.
and you're just watching them do things. And because everything is so matter of fact and nobody's really taking time to make a big deal out of it, you're just kind of like, yeah, like, okay, like I'm in, like,
Yeah.
you feel like you are strapped in, for the ride, and you don't really have time to question anything. And that's kind of how I felt with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a marvel of effects work. Really impressive stuff in this movie. Lots of practicals, lots of matte paintings. As a matter of fact, let's check off our list here. So there are matte paintings in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely animatronics.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely got to be prosthetics in here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember any stop motion though. I could be forgetting something.
Maybe the Rock Eater might be stop motion.
Could be.
Yeah.
We got force perspective in this bitch.
Definitely, we have those little goblins that like revive him, and he has like that big that crazy like laser with all the colored water in it.
Oh Jesus! I need to watch this again already. I don't even remember what you're talking about.
Before Atreyu goes through that through the big statues.
Oh yeah.
Before then, where he's like hanging out with those two, they're like an old bickering couple.
Yes, now I remember.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. There's definitely miniatures in here, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then pyrotechnics and sets. I'm just assuming those are also in there. Like sets is going to be the thing across the board here for all of these. Just you can tell these are actually actors acting on a set. There's not very little, if any, green screen going on.
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. So from 84, we go into 85, and we got Day of the Dead. This I'm actually really interested to hear your thoughts on this, because we didn't really talk about it at all. Like, obviously I knew you watched it, but we didn't really get into the nitty gritty. So
do you want to lay it out real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say real quick. This is the third in the of the Dead trilogy from Romero. You have Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. All roughly, give or take, like almost a decade between each one. Dawn of the Dead is 78, and then Night of the Living Dead is like 68, I think.
Wow.
Something like that. And then this is 85. So all different decades. And they're all more or less about, they all have like this social commentary in them, which we can talk about a little bit later. And Night of the Living Dead, for its time, was incredibly shocking and influential, and utilized some, it's got some zombie work in it. There's some practical effects going on in that, but Dawn of the Dead really takes things up a notch. And then Day of the Dead, they're firing on all cylinders. And we are in the midst of the slasher boom. Horror films in general have never been bigger than they are at this time. So because of that, all these innovations are being made. They know how to do the blood right. They know how to do head explosions, squibs. All this stuff has never looked better than it ever has. So that brings us to Day of the Dead. The effects are done by Tom Savini, who is a legend in the makeup effects world. He's done everything from, he's worked on movies up until as recently as like 2023 with like the Black Phone, and he's done, he did Dawn of the Dead as well. He wasn't on Night of the Living Dead, but he's done Creep Show. He's done, I mean, his resume is crazy. Friday the 13th, parts 1 and 4 he did. I mean, the guy is he's makeup effects royalty. So yeah, Big Rod says Maniac as well as Prowler. I'm just going off the dome right now, but yeah, I know his repertoire is crazy. So what was your experience with Day of the Dead? Obviously I like this movie a lot, but
dude, this movie rips. This was the first one. I watched these all in order, right? So this is the first one that I watched for this. You get the first few minutes are just like them in that town trying to do some like see if there's any like survivors or whatever. And so you get a first few shots of the zombies, and you can already tell like the production value was just high and already I think higher than what I was expecting, honestly. I just never know when I go back into like this is kind of the cutoff, like mid late 80s, like horror, sci-fi, fantasy stuff. Like it's kind of a toss-up. And so even in those shots, I was like, okay, like these look really good. And then you get the shot, man, maybe it's before then. You get the shot where who's the main girl?
Oh geez, I don't remember anyone's name.
She is like in her room, and she goes and she's like looking at the calendar, and the hands come out of the wall. And that shot, I was like, just like fully, I was like, okay, this is gonna be really good.
Dr. Sarah Bowman is her name.
Sarah, okay. Yeah, that shot is crazy. You had it in your intro too that you rolled earlier. And yeah, it was also just like it's a really good movie. The guy who plays like the main antagonist is insane. He's like really scary because you like
Captain Rhodes.
Yeah, you like really believe that like he's one of the dudes where you're like, this dude's capable of just doing anything and it's like exploding at any moment. And so even just like that, like the social stuff going on in the film, even outside of like the zombies and the effects and everything, is already very tense and creates that air of just and then so you start layering in all the zombie stuff, and the effects are crazy. Like I was thinking of a few shows ago we talked about Night of the Living Dead, and those are like, it's kind of just like makeup, and they kind of just look like really sick. They look like people that look really sick. And then in this one, they really ramped it up, and they really look like they look gross, like they look scary. The craziest parts in this film are towards the end when a bunch of the soldiers and some other people are getting like ripped apart, and it's like some of the craziest practical effects, like with body stuff that I've seen. There's a few shots where like one of the soldiers is getting pulled apart, and he's like laying down and he's screaming. So they somehow go from a shot pretty seamlessly of him like actually there and he's screaming, and then they're like grabbing his head and his chest and just like they just completely rip him apart. And,
that was Captain Rhodes,
dude. And I can't no, the one of the other ones too, the other guy gets like his head ripped apart. The one that's like laughing the whole time, he's like the crazy one.
Yeah, that shit's gross, dude.
And he's like yelling and laughing the whole time, and his laugh like slowly turns into more of like a scream because he's getting his fucking head ripped off of his body. And I was just like it's so good, and it's so horrific, but it's done so well. And it's like, it's also a character that like you're so glad to see him dead, that it creates this weird like mix of emotions where you're just like, I just wasn't sure how to react, but it was so good. And I don't know that there's any CGI in this, like,
oh dude, no,
at all.
No.
Um,
There can't. I mean, I would be very surprised if there
none
was.
of it looked like, and not that like if they mixed it, like I don't care, like it's fine. But
Yeah.
I was like thinking about that as I was watching it. Even like there's the big elevator thing that drops down into the lab. That like, like that real big like lift that goes from like where the helipad is that goes down.
Mhm.
And even that, like the first time they use that and they come down is like a cool shot where they're all just standing on it and it drops real low. Like the lighting is like really cool. And I was watching that and it was reminding me of there's a similar-ish shot. I could be making this up, but there's like a similar shot in Endgame where they're all in like a big lab somewhere, and there's a similar kind of shot where they drop on some big lift thing. And it was just making me think, I was like, this looks like this would be something that would just be CGI'd in now. They wouldn't make like a lift like that for 2 shots, like make a huge ass hydraulic lift. They're just not gonna do
Mhm.
that. And that's like early on in the film. So even like they do that and everything just feels everything just feels very real. This movie kicks ass. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we reached a point where um it got more it was cheaper to just build the set because there was no alternative, and then we
Mhm.
slowly reached a point where it got cheaper to just make everything digitally.
Mhm.
So it was a slow process, but at this time it would have just been like, yeah, like we'll just build that.
Do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it wasn't even, there was no alternative, but it wasn't even like something that I'd like to think it's not even something that they were like, oh, like we have to do this. Like, no, that was just what you did. And
I'm sure there was some guy who was like, shit, like I gotta figure out how we
yeah,
go
but
in.
like that was his job, like
Yeah.
he probably lived for that shit. So yeah, no, I mean it's really this might be my this is definitely my second favorite of the Dead trilogy.
Okay.
I think I really like the original from the
Mm.
60s the most, but
Dude, there's the scene where Sarah has to cut her boy's arm off and then like sears it. And like that whole scene is like so very visceral. And they just like film, like they just show the whole thing. A lot of times that would be like a scene where like they speed through it real quick, or they get creative with how they film it so it's not as like right there. But for this, they were just like, yo, look, she's doing this right now, and like they just run through the whole process. It was crazy.
yeah, it's so you know for as bombastic and like over the top as Romero zombie movies are, they're very rooted in like this is what it would actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's because he's interested in the social commentary of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And the movies are very much, for as entertaining as they are, they're making a point as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's basically about how we've basically lost the war, and zombies are gonna essentially replace humans, and basically we're doing it to ourselves because we can't get our shit straight and we can't work together, and we kind of deserve to lose because we take every opportunity and squander it, and it's like the humans are fighting
Mm-hmm.
and they can't get their shit figured out, but the zombies they're all unified. There's no kind of there's no real dissent with them, right? Like they're all kind of on the same page, and that's sort of the whole. And it's prevalent today too, man. If you think about it,
It's
like
probably more prevalent today. Yeah. Than
yeah,
it was 40
so
years ago.
yeah, I mean, Romero was really a master, and I would definitely encourage you to check out Dawn of the Dead as well.
Yeah, I need to. Dude, yeah, and just like one more note on like it being a very like real depiction of a ridiculous scenario. Like in that scene, like where she has to go and like cut her like this guy's arm off, and then she like sears the end and they like wrap it up. All of that happens and it takes place over a couple minutes, and then she like completely like breaks down after that.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of that in there where it's not just like, all right, we'll kill these zombies and then let's go do this. Like the whole time, like everybody's like, yo, like this is completely insane. And like you can tell that they're realistically scared and like very cautious the whole time. And yeah, it really helps. Like it doesn't feel super campy because of that, because they're actually like treating it with respect, like how you would actually treat it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Like they're going through the their due diligence, and they're showing you what this would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't talk about this movie without talking about Bub, the zombie.
Dude.
Bub is awesome, and he's the real, he's the real kind of I don't know, the heart of the movie.
Yeah,
His effects are great.
the actor was great.
Yeah, whoever was hired to play him, Sherman Howard is his name.
Nice.
Shout out Sherman Howard. Bub might be the first smart zombie.
Dude, yeah, that was like a great I just love that. That's like an actual, it's very novel storyline of like this guy actually trying to like reverse the zombies. I'm sure it's been done since then.
Yeah, it's been iterated on a lot. I think I would like to think at the time though that was like the first time we ever saw that. It's actually ripped off. It's extremely ripped off in Resident Evil, the third one. I forget what the third one's called.
The movie you're saying?
Yeah, the third Resident Evil movie, like straight up copies like the whole like zombie, like trying to teach him about stuff and like
dude,
and
they throw everything out the window when they do those movies. So like the game story doesn't matter, real life doesn't matter. Let's just do some crazy shit.
Yeah, rather than ripping or doing an adaptation of the game like everyone wants, they're like, let's just rip off Day of the Dead. No one remembers that movie, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, Day of the Dead's great. Classic zombie effects. You can't really ask for better. So I'm really glad that you got to watch this, and even more glad that you liked it.
Yeah, it was great. And I saw Old Restless was saying there's some other movie where all the zombies get guns.
Yeah, Land of the Dead.
Yeah, that sounds absurd. Also, like Resident Evil 5-esque, but I guess they do. I get it. They give in 4 as well. But
Big Rod, do you mean so Night of the Living Dead has a remake? I know Dawn of the Dead has the Zack Snyder remake, but I don't remember Day of the Dead getting a remake, unless I'm misremembering.
Bub going at the end and like shoot, like you like putting the pieces together of like, oh, he's gonna go and shoot him, and then he does the little salute.
Yeah, dude,
so satisfying, man.
Yeah, it was so good. No, I'm really glad you liked it, man.
Yeah.
It's a dope ass movie.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right, so that's Day of the Dead, incredible effects. Maybe I'm thinking Land. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen any of the other so I've only seen the original 3. I know Romero did more. He did Diary of the Dead, Survival of the Dead, and Land of the Dead. I haven't seen any of those.
Jesus.
I hear they kind of go, they're not as good. All right. 85 gives way to 86. Indeed. And we have The Fly from David Cronenberg. Real quick, I'll just say the effects in this film were done by Chris Walas and his team, as well as a makeup artist, Stephen Dupois. Their work on this film actually earned them an Academy Award for Best Makeup.
Damn. Good.
And like I said, there are many Day of the Deads. These have to be like kind of crappy remakes though, right? Like
yeah. Remember I started watching one from like the 90s or something, and I was like, why does this look so good? Not like the movie wasn't good, but like the shots, I was like, I thought this didn't look like this.
So yeah, this is probably your first David Cronenberg film as well, if I had to guess.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like this is my first like body horror film.
Yeah, dude. So
yeah.
So if Day of the Dead is our zombie contribution, then this is absolutely our body horror contribution. I feel like we kind of accidentally covered a lot of different bases with our selections.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we forgot to do
Oh, yeah, and run through. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't believe any matte paintings unless I'm misremembering. Maybe there's some stuff in the helicopter. when they're going, but
Maybe.
I can't remember. Definitely some animatronics. I think in the very beginning when you have like the title card, and there's that zombie who's like jaws falling off. I believe there's some animatronics there. Prosthetics, absolutely. Probably not any stop motion. Probably not any forced perspective. Maybe miniatures. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
Definitely some pyrotechnics at the end, I think, right? And just kind of throughout, lots of guns. I think guns and stuff in general would constitute. And then there's obviously practical sets as well. So, dude, Eric's still here. What's up? Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I rewatched this one ahead of the show. Tyler, get into it, man. Tell me about your thoughts on The Fly.
Dude, this is one of my favorite horror films.
What? Damn, that's high praise, bro.
Dude, yeah, I was not prepared for how, like, I've seen shots from this before, and I was just expecting, like, I wasn't expecting a great storyline, but the story is great. And Jeff Goldblum is dude, my first note is just Jeff Goldblum is crazy. And then I have another note later that is Jeff Goldblum is extremely good. And then I have another one. Let me see. Yeah, Jeff Goldblum is fucking crazy. I put that down like greasy. Yeah, dude, he's so weird. Like even when he's normal.
Yeah, even before shit goes down, he's weird.
Yeah, you're like, this dude's super. My only single gripe with this movie, my only one, is that they just sprint into who's the girl?
Gina Davis.
Who is she in the movie?
His girlfriend. I don't know.
When they like hook up at the beginning, I feel like it comes out of nowhere. She goes and she's like, she says something to him about like being cute after
her name is Veronica. Sorry,
Veronica. Like she's been there like filming him, whatever, and like he's just been mad weird, and the whole time she's just been like, this dude's super weird, and then all of a sudden she's like, yo, you're mad cute, and he's like, word,
dude.
And they hook up.
He's got that mad scientist riz, bro.
Dude.
He manages to bag Gina Davis. I think they were, they like were actually married at one point. And
wow.
They might have met on this movie. I'm not sure. It might have been something they did prior to this.
Dude, what a weird film to like, for her to do that and be like, all right, I fuck with this guy. Like,
dude, yeah, man. So the movies, it's pretty light on effects until the back half.
Yeah.
Because gonna be spoilers here for The Fly, guys. Mild ones. I won't go beat by beat, but basically what you have is a slow progression where Jeff Goldblum is slowly becoming a fly, right? So naturally this takes place over a period of time. Laren is in the house. What's up, man?
What's good, Laren?
And yeah, man, like, God, I almost just want to jump right to the end because that's like really, really when everything happens. But yeah, man, do you have any more thoughts on this before I kind of get into it?
Dude, the whole early parts of the transition are really good before he starts actually transitioning, and he's like, kind of just, he thinks he's like, he kind of starts seeming like somebody who found like this, like an online guru that he's been paying attention to. And he's just like all worked up, and he starts doing little weird stuff. Like he's eating mad sugar. And his skin just starts getting like slightly shitty.
Yeah, it's all shit that flies do.
Yeah, yeah, dude.
The only other thing the only thing that flies don't do that Jeff Goldblum does is he starts like working those uneven bars and shit,
dude,
and, like and doing all that gymnast stuff, dude.
Bro, I literally have a note of they just love gymnastics in the 80s.
Yeah,
because that's like Footloose also has like a long gymnast scene.
Just a random scene of dudes like ripping it, which looks sick as fuck. Like I understand why they put it in the film, but it's always hilarious because they always film it in such a way that like obviously that's not Jeff Goldblum.
It's just this great jack gymnast dude all of a sudden like in the shadows doing just like ripping, and he's just like, he takes a second and he's like looking at it, and then just kind of hops up and does it, and then Veronica's watching him, and she's like, the fuck,
Dude.
And I love
yeah.
that scene. I love that scene.
Everything in the movie is really fun until it's not.
Yeah.
When he kind of has like, I can't remember at this point, he's had a falling out. Excuse me. He's had like a falling out with Veronica, and he goes out and gets in the arm wrestling contest.
Dude, that scene's sick.
Tell me what your reaction was to that scene.
Dude, he just like barrels. He's like, so he's crashing out, right? But he's like,
he's crashing. I love that term, dude.
But he's also getting just progressively like really crazy and really strong. Rolls into this bar, and there's these two just normal dudes like arm wrestling, because you just do that, and so you already know exactly what's gonna happen, and yeah, dude. So they go and they arm wrestle, and I thought he was just gonna like beat him really bad and like put his arm through the table or something, but he just like snaps this guy's like whole top of his arm,
dude,
and then he steals his girl and goes home,
dude. And the chick is like, you would think she'd be like, I'm not going anywhere with you. No, like she still goes with him. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that arm break is brutal, and it's practical, and it looks great.
It's really gross. Yeah.
It looks great. It looks amazing. Yeah, man. And so I guess we can kind of just jump to the end. The full transformation of him into the Fly. It's pretty gradual. I would say he has like three kind of forms, where he's really like prosthetic laden.
But it's him still.
Yeah. It looks great. And then there's the final one where he
like the head like cracks open.
Yeah, dude, he like cracks open and there's like a fucking actual fly in there. Dude. Like who's been inside of his morphing body, dude. It's so disgusting.
I was watching like a breakdown on like how they did all that, and because like when it opens up, like the head inside is almost like bigger than the head outside was. And so they had all these metal like they made the fly head, and there's these like metal plates inside that like once they turn it on, it like expanded the whole thing. And so it's like a big animatronic, and it looks complete, like that scene, and like the eyes just like ooze out, and it's like
it's so disgusting,
horrific, dude. But even
real quick, I just want to say what's up to Our Life in Horror. Thank you guys for joining. Good to see you,
dude. I think why I like this movie so much, and I think the scariest part of it for me, the part that's actually like scary, is he kind of cycles through like he's like he gets all hopped up where he's just like, oh, I did something great, and then he realizes like, oh, I fucked up, I'm turning into a fly. That's terrifying, right?
Yeah,
he wants that, and he gets scared, and then
he's really scared at one point, and he's like wants Veronica to help him.
Yeah, but then he hits this point where he starts getting like really obsessed with it, and like is like really interested in it, like scientifically again, which is really interesting because it kind of brings you full circle to like how he is at the beginning, where he's just this like very curious science guy. And so he enters this like weird state where he's just like studying his own transition into being a fly. And he's like filming himself, right? Like he's filming like how he eats, which is super gross.
Dude, yeah. What he does to that guy is the actor's name is John Getz. He plays Stathis Borans.
Dude. Yeah, but like that stuff was so scary where like it's Jeff Goldblum being completely fucking insane, and he's just like kind of upbeat and joking around as he's just completely
leaning more into the transformation. But there are brief glimpses of it where he's like he's losing himself and he's scared about it, and he knows that if Veronica's around him, like he's going to do something bad to her. Dude, and that kind of brings us to the very, very end.
Oh,
which is
dude.
so fucking crazy, dude.
Dude.
He's melted off John Getz's arm and his foot.
Full fly.
He's a full fly at this point, and he he um he tries to go back into the machine and fix things again, and he accidentally merges his fly form with the pod itself. So his final form is just like this. It's like this. What's the term? It's like this biomechanical creature where it's like part flesh, part machine, which is so David Cronenberg. Like that's his style, basically. Is like what if you were turning into a monster and there was also like metal parts of you.
Ah.
I mean,
Ah.
that's not Cronenberg in a nutshell, but there are like that's very Videodrome, which is another film of his. And Big Rod also mentions Scanners. Scanners is dope. Dude, so yeah, and at this point, he's somehow still alive, but he is just this disgusting mass of human and fly and robot.
And it looks great.
It looks awesome. Can't ignore that. But then he basically has Veronica put the shotgun.
He like grabs it.
He like reaches out and grabs it with his mangled fucking limb and puts the fucking barrel to his own dome piece, dude. And it's like
it's his last act of humanity that he like somehow scrapes together real quick at the end.
Which is like it's so insane, dude. It's such a sad, tragic story. And Veronica does it, she blows him away, and then it just goes to credits, dude. It's just over after that.
Dude, and even then at first she was like, no. And at this point in the movie, you're like, come on. Like you think you're gonna fix this? Like point of no return.
No, he's done up, dude. Chuck, what's up, man? Chuck does a movie commentary podcast with a friend of mine named Chris.
Oh, sick.
And the really good podcast. Everybody should check it out. It's called Beyond the Blood Podcast. I just watched their episode on House of a Thousand Corpses, and it was really interesting stuff. Thanks for being here, Chuck. Yeah, dude. And so all of this to say, all of these extravagant effects and this tragic story, it's all elevated by the practical effects, baby. That's what it's all about.
Dude, and last thing that I can hit on here, again, also just like this movie is great. There's the whole angle where you find out that Veronica is pregnant, which I've pieced that together.
How did we forget to put that? We forgot to talk about that shit.
Dude, so I just have a note that's just, oh my God, she's pregnant. And because I was just like, what? Like realizing it in real time.
Yeah,
and
you're
then
like, you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah, and it's like they get into
what's that baby gonna look like?
Yeah, dude, and it gets into like a really like surprisingly deep and complex like conversation about like abortion and like women's rights and like family and they do so much of that, but without they don't talk about it a lot, but they kind of set the pieces in motion and let you kind of just interpret and they did a really good job of just like respecting the audience, but like really giving you a lot of like heavy stuff to like think about. And that's also like the movie ends without you knowing exactly what she does or what happens there. So yeah, fucking insane.
I will just say there is a sequel to The Fly.
Oh.
And it's about the son.
Oh.
I have not seen it.
Is it Cronenberg again, or was somebody else like, yo, can I?
No, I think it's actually directed by Chris Walas, the guy who did the effects. I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think they actually had him do the sequel.
Very interesting.
And it stars The Fly too. It's the guy Eric Stoltz. Eric Stoltz famously was gonna play. He was going to play Marty McFly in Back to the Future, and they shot like I want to say like a third of the movie. and then they recast him because it just wasn't working.
Dude, that fucking sucks.
And it's fucking Back to the Future. Yeah.
It's rough.
Do you think it's worth watching Old Restless? I want to check it out at some point. I have the box set. Yeah, Chuck, me and Chuck have the box set. It's a cool ass box set. I guess we should mention The Fly is a remake from a movie from like the 60s.
Oh, it is a remake. Oh.
Yeah, from 1959.
Wow.
Or 58 this says. I think who's in this? Is this a Vincent Price banger? Yes, it is. Yeah. So The Fly is a remake. They were making a lot of remakes back in the day. The Thing is a remake. They were remaking these like science fiction B movies from like the 50s and the 60s. Like The Blob is another one.
Gotcha.
You know, like that famous image of like the movie theater and there's like grape jelly like pouring out of it or whatever.
I don't know.
From The Blob. Go just look up The Blob.
The Blob jelly.
1958. And if you just Google image it, yeah, you'll see. This is something that's been like burned into my brain. I think I was watching a movie where they were watching The Blob in the movie.
Oh, that's funny.
And I was aware of it from that.
Dude. That's like straight up jelly.
What's up, Wes2217? I don't think I've seen you in here before, but welcome. Good to have you. Yeah. If you're talking about The Blob, Chuck, yeah, The Blob remake is sick. I'll have to try to find a way for you to watch that, Tyler.
Yeah, very down.
We could do like a remakes show or something. That'd be fun.
Ooh.
We'll have to file that away. All right, so I think that mostly does it for The Fly. We kind of went pretty in depth on that.
You want to run through the pillars?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any matte paintings. Definitely animatronics. Definitely prosthetics. Don't think there's stop motion. Yeah, I don't think so. Probably no forced perspective. Doubt there's any miniatures. Probably some pyrotechnics with the pods and everything.
Yeah.
And then obviously everything is on a set. So
yeah, there are no forced perspective, but they do a cool thing where they have they probably use like a rotating room for the scenes where he's like climbing around on his walls.
Oh yeah.
Those shots looked so good. Like you could tell that it wasn't like the gravity was too good. Like he wasn't like rigged up and like climbing. He was definitely like actually just like on the ground.
Dude, that's the shit they used to do back in the day, man.
Looks
you ever
so
see have you seen the Nightmare on Elm Street, the first Nightmare on Elm Street?
Yeah.
So do you remember that kill where Tina is like on the ceiling and shit?
Dude, that shit fucked me up as a kid. I love that movie.
Dude, they built like a room.
Yeah.
And like had that bitch like upside down and shit,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, it seems horrific.
All right, man. Well, thanks for being here. Fly 2 is messed up. Watch at your own risk.
Oh, God.
The Blob remake is sick. I love the Blob remake. Gruesome. That movie holds nothing back. Everyone is in danger in that movie. It's awesome.
So curious. All right.
It's good, man. It's good. All right. So the way it happened to work out is all my recommendations all came in a row. So 85, 86, and my final one, Evil Dead 2, 1987. I will just say, briefly, Tom Sullivan handled the stop motion and the props for this movie. Tony Gardner, who's famous effects artist, he worked on a lot of things. He's most famous for doing a lot of the stuff with Chucky and a lot of the Child's Play stuff. And then a fella named Dave Kindlin managed the mechanical effects within makeup, and Vern Hyde and his crew handled general physical and mechanical effects. So looks like there's 4 main dudes who kind of really made this movie work. And there's a lot of effects going on in this movie. And, you know, this speaks to the fact that there's a whole crew that goes into making this stuff happen. You know, it's not just one guy overseeing everything. There's like multiple departments and all that stuff. So I love all of the Evil Dead movies. There are no bad Evil Dead movies. They're all awesome. This is probably my third favorite. I really love the original and I love the remake, and then I think I would go with this one. But they're all really, really close. So I'll let you give me your thoughts on this one.
Dude, I watched the first one.
Wait, what?
I watched the first one.
What do you mean?
I mean, I watched the first one, bro.
Why didn't you watch Evil Dead 2?
I thought I was supposed to watch the first one.
Nah, dude, I told you Evil Dead 2, man. What are you talking about, bro?
No, watch the first one. He never uses the chainsaw. I was like, damn. And they show it, and he's...
Bro, you were supposed to watch the second one. Come on, dog.
Wait, let me see what you texted me. Let me see.
I definitely told you Evil Dead 2, bro. There's no way I didn't. This motherfucker, dude.
Hold up. Oh my god.
All right, well, I definitely said it on Monday. I told you Evil Dead 2.
Dude, I'm so sorry, man.
All right.
You've seen the first one, right?
Yeah, I've seen them all, man. Sorry, guys.
I can watch it real quick and come back.
I'm not even mad. Evil Dead 2 inspired so many filmmakers. Every time I watch, I catch a new scene that has Evil Dead 2 roots. Had you seen the first Evil Dead before?
No, I had only seen the remake that we went and watched a bunch of years ago in theaters that I don't really remember. This is good though. We can talk about maybe the contrast between the first and second, because I imagine the second is like a good jump in production quality from the first one.
Yeah, it's like 6 years gap. The first one's 81, and then this is 87. The effects are good in the first one too, for sure. Wes points out. I love Army of Darkness, but Dead by Dawn is still my favorite. Yeah, most people like the second one. I think the second one is like the fan favorite. All right. I'm sorry. I can't have that word on the screen, or I can't say it. I might get demonetized or something. Yeah. See, like anyone could tell you, maybe with the exception of Evil Dead Rise, anyone could tell you that any of them are their favorite, and I really wouldn't push back, really.
How many is it in the whole?
There's 5 now.
Okay.
There's Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and then they did the remake, and then they did Evil Dead Rise.
Okay. So I've only seen the first one.
All right, that's fine though. We can still make this. We can make this work. Okay. I thought that you had seen the first one already, so I was like, watch Evil Dead 2 because there's just more effects in that one.
Okay.
It's more of effects heavy. But okay, so since you've seen Evil Dead 1 more recently than me, take it away. Before though, I will answer Chuck's question. I don't think you've seen Evil Dead Rise, right? I was really high on it when I saw it in theaters. I've come down on it somewhat. It's still really good. It feels like it pulls punches though a little bit versus the remake, which pulls 0 punches. So I thought it was good. I just wish, if anything, it was more violent. But all right, go ahead and give us your thoughts on Evil Dead 1 from 1981.
Dude, this movie's very it's super lo-fi, right? You can definitely tell it's like it felt like, a handful of people making a movie in a house in the middle of nowhere. The effects are really interesting. I feel like a lot of it is like, again, very lo-fi, but there's a handful of decisions that really help like sell everything. The sound design is fantastic, which is a big part of that. Yeah, the prosthetics crazy. The the sound design and the eyes that they do for when people get possessed when they get
When they become
whatever.
deadites.
Yeah. Are like just really good. Cheryl is the first girl that gets like possessed, and that scene is crazy. I also she does like there's so many just like classic tropes in here where like she's in her room by herself and she gets scared thinking something's outside. So she fucking goes outside. And the whole time you're watching that and you're just like, yo, like really? And that's when she gets attacked by the trees.
Mhm.
Which like really worked for me because again, it's just like they really sell it because it's very physical, it's very real, and she's actually like, you can. I imagine they essentially like just wrapped her up with like tree stuff and then pulled it off and then reversed the footage, which is something that you can very practically, realistically, easily do for cheap, but make it look good. Um, that really worked for me. And then she gets possessed, and like the way that they edit her voice and her eyes just like is super bugging. She sounds super, she like that low voice, like kind of like how the girl in The Exorcist gets.
Yeah.
And then they just lock her in the cellar, which is hilarious because then she's kind of just there for the rest of the movie, just kind of a she's just kind of a nuisance.
She's just like talking shit from the fucking basement on them for most of the movie.
Yeah, she's just like, yo, and they're like, whatever.
She's like, yeah, we'll get to you when we have time. Like, we got other shit going on here.
Dude, when Ash is I also love this movie's like, again, like I say lo-fi, but like some of it just like you can tell it's people making a movie for like kind of the first time. Ash is just like not a great actor in this yet. I imagine he gets better as the years go on.
Yeah, they hadn't
But
quite figured out him tonally. He becomes more of like a sarcastic, quippy guy as the movies go on. Yeah.
There's him. There's like the scene, one of the scenes early on when I think Scott, the other guy, is like killing not Cheryl, but like there's a whole crazy fight scene, and Ash just kind of looks like he's just like in an uncomfortable situation, like he's like standing behind somebody in line at like the grocery store who's like arguing with the cashier, like he's kind of just like slightly uncomfortable, and it's just like and I also love the scene with Cheryl and Scott. At one point, Cheryl's possessed, and Scott just goes, "Cheryl, stop it!" And there's just like a handful of things in there that like just don't really make sense, but are just like really just funny. But yeah, as people started getting possessed, the prosthetics are really good. It's like very kind of unconventional makeup, but it kind of like really works with like what the origin of the curse is supposed to be. Almost like not Mayan, but like something from that like realm. And again, dude, the voices are crazy. When was it Linda? Yeah, Linda, like Ash's girlfriend, gets possessed, and she kind of just hangs out for a little while because he can't like bring himself to like kill her, but she's not attacking him for some reason, and so she's just like sitting and like smiling, and her voice is like super high pitched, and she's just like hanging out.
Yeah,
and
she looks real creepy.
Dude, super creepy. Yeah, the kills aren't super crazy. I mean, the first one's super crazy, where they kill, I guess not Cheryl, but the other Scott's girlfriend. And the end scene where they decompose was fantastic and foul.
Yeah, that is definitely some stop motion, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, dude. Do you know like the POV of the entity stuff?
Yep.
Do you know how they did that effect?
Only because you mentioned it on, I think, like an episode of The Dispatch or something recently.
I might have actually, yeah. I think I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean most people probably know, but they literally just attached the camera to a 2x4 and just ran through the woods with the piece of wood, just shaking it around.
Dude, they did that, and then for the they added another 2x4 like perpendicular to make like a big T, with it for the scene where they crash through the window, where the force comes and like hits the window.
So it would stop it.
Well, it like crashes because it's like you're watching the force come to the house, and then it hits the window, and like the window breaks, and the force kind of enters the house a little bit before it like kind of comes back out. And so they literally like broke that window, just like real glass, real window, and they just like straight up broke the window with the 2x4.
Dude, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Dude,
Yeah.
and you know what else I really liked? Is the scene when Ash goes in the basement
The
and
blood.
well, there's like he walks down and the camera does a really slow like
Mm.
360
Dude.
where it's showing everything in the basement
Mm-hmm.
and then it comes back on him.
Mm-hmm.
Really just it's a simple thing. It's a relatively simple camera move,
So tense.
but in that context it really, adds so much to the overall effect. And it's like this is what, he's scanning the room, right? And he's kind of taking everything in. And it's so slow and methodical, and it really allows like the tension to build, and you're not sure if something's going to pop up or
Mhm.
what. It's just really good, really simple, effective filmmaking.
Dude, that cellar is also not actually in that house. That
Oh,
house
really?
didn't. That house that they filmed most of the movie in didn't have like a basement like that, and so they made like a little fake one in the living room with like the trap door, and then they just dug a hole. There's just like a 4-foot hole that they would like duck down into, and then they filmed all the basement scenes somewhere else, and then just kind of cut them together and make it look like it was actually there, but it's not even in that house.
Wow.
Cool basic filmmaking stuff, but really works. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. So this you kind of threw me off a little bit, but
I just thought that you changed it.
yeah. Obviously this movie's a banger. Evil Dead 2 also great. You should definitely watch that.
Will.
So let's run down our list here. Any matte paintings?
Nah.
This is fresher in your mind than it is mine. Definitely some animatronics, I think, with like the big monster at the end. No, or was that all?
I don't think so.
Was
None
that
of it.
all like composite sort of like stop motion kind of thing?
I
That
don't know.
that big monster at the end. I don't know what the fuck how they made that.
Yeah, I don't know. And it happens like real quick. They don't like interact with it a whole lot. It kind of just like happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Definitely prosthetics. Not sure about stop motion. Probably some form of it.
Yeah, for the
It's an
essentially, like,
umbrella
time
term,
lapse.
basically. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's time lapse and stuff, which I think falls under stop motion. Don't recall any force perspective. Don't think there's any miniatures. Maybe some pyrotechnics with the shotgun. There's a shotgun in this one, right?
There's a shotgun, fire. Yeah. Lots of fog. Not that's pyrotechnics, but close.
I would say that's on. That would fall under the umbrella of pyrotechnics.
Fog everywhere. Yeah.
Sets, obviously. All right. Now we're into 1988, and we got one of your suggestions. Finally, we got Willow. I'll let you take this one.
Willow is a movie I watched as a kid. My mom's boyfriend at the time really liked it, and so I watched it like under that context where like he would put it on occasionally, and I never didn't see it all the way through for a long time. So it was always just like weird, mysterious thing that most other people didn't know. And then I bought it years ago, and I've watched it a few times since then. This is a very interesting one. This is it's George Lucas produced it, and he wrote it, which you can kind of tell as you get later into the story. This movie's interesting in that they start being like, oh, cool, we can use like CGI and stuff. And it's kind of like, it really feels like as the movie transitions into the later stages, like after like the halfway mark, for me, it's almost like the quality of it generally starts to drop. The beginning is so good and so strong, and like the whole beginning, like they're like in this village, and there's like this like town like gathering event, and nothing terribly magical, but like they really do a really good job of creating something that feels super real and lived in. Um, and the set is just great and very whimsical. And then you start getting like bits of just really bad CGI as you go, which kind of like kills some of the vibe. But then you also get lots of great practical effects. You get the dogs, like those like pig dog things.
Dude, yeah, those are just straight up dogs with like costumes on, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. What? 'Cause this was your first time watching it, right?
Yeah. I wanted you to just kind of set the table, and then I'll give my thoughts if you're ready.
Yeah, and just to, if anybody hasn't seen it, it's essentially just there is this like village of like not dwarves, but they're just like really short people, and this like regular sized baby shows up, and they realize like, oh, like this is a baby from like this other like this big kingdom of like these tall people, so we got to bring the baby back, and so they go on this trip to bring this baby back, unbeknownst to them. This baby is like part of this prophecy, and the people at the kingdom are trying to kill the baby, so they get all wrapped up in that. And then they're like, oh, we kind of like the baby now, so we're gonna save it. And they go on this crazy quest, and there's like a dragon and a talking hamster looking thing for a little bit, and there's all these like really really miniature dudes that are CGI'd. Mad Mardigan is super badass.
Yeah, Val Kilmer.
Yeah, and there's a wizard at the end. I think that pretty much. We definitely got to talk about the end fight scene because it's hilarious. But yeah, I think that covers the general gist of it.
Yeah, so similar to Neverending Story, this was one that I was aware of. It never seemed to kind of have the same prestige surrounding it that Neverending Story did. But I was always curious about it, and I knew it was like Lucasfilm. It was like under his umbrella, and he's only had like Lucasfilm isn't this it's not this huge thing, right? It's like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and like this. Like there's really not a lot of like Lucasfilm properties. So when you see that that sort of logo ahead of it, it's like, oh, okay, this is like it's interesting. And there's elements of Star Wars in this as well.
Yes, yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, and yeah, I think I don't know. I wasn't as into this one, to be honest. It felt like some other stuff that I had seen before. A little bit of like Lord of the Rings in there. It's like the fantasy sort of stuff. Yeah, I just felt like Lucas trying to do his attempt at something fantasy, as opposed to sci-fi with like Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and I was kind of alluding to that, is like it starts off where it kind of very much feels like sort of its own thing, and like it's very realized. But then characters just start making really weird choices out of like nowhere, and like the plot kind of like is weird. Mad Mardigan like loses the baby right away, and then when you meet up with him again, everything's just like cool, and then he's like really on board to be like, all right, I'm gonna help you with the baby, and then everybody's like, all right, cool, we trust you, even though like he literally just lost the baby, and like they don't mention it. And then the fight scene at the end is like between this old wizard and this like queen, and they start like just like boxing like like they're trying to use magic, but it's not really working. And so they kind of get up close at one point, and they just start fucking hitting, like literally just boxing each other. And they're both like,
it's like two old ladies.
They're literally like in their 70s or 80s, and they're boxing. And then the queen just like starts hitting, like using the force, which is crazy. And And then she's also just letting Willow run around like in that room and not paying attention to him as if he's like not potentially a threat. And
Well, yeah, she doesn't see him as one,
yeah, but it's just
but
like
he's like slowly been becoming a wizard throughout the course of the movie.
yeah.
So like that's a thing as well, but like you don't particularly care that much.
Yeah. I do really like him though. What's it?
Warwick Davis.
Yeah, who I did not realize is in Harry P. Had no idea.
Yeah, dude, he's like that small boy.
Yeah,
Like-
he's Professor Flitwick.
Mhm.
Flitwick, is that how you say that?
Yeah.
And he's also one of the main goblins at the bank.
Gringotts.
At Gringotts. Yeah. But as far as effects go, this movie is quite a hodgepodge of effects. Especially there's like the big scene where there's like that big monster and there's those other like trolls that are crawling around, and there's the scene with this monster which is like kind of it's surprisingly bad, essentially, like especially given that Star Wars came before this and like
This was
looks better.
10 years before this.
Yeah, and it's like this like stop motion two-headed dragon monster thing that looks like it was made like it looks like it's from like it looks like King Kong era, like 50s. Just kind of like slapped in there. The leprechaun.
Warwick Davis is also the leprechaun in those movies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
He's got the monopoly on that small boy acting, dude. If
Dude, him and
any like small dude they need, he's in there.
him or who's the other one from Game of Thrones?
Oh, Peter Dinklage.
They should do like a Freddy versus Jason kind of thing.
I don't know if Warwick Davis is alive still.
I think he is. Dude, he was super young in Willow. He's like 17 or something in Willow.
Oh yeah, he's 55. No,
Yeah.
his wife died in
Oh.
last year. That's what I'm thinking of.
Bummer.
Rest in peace. Yeah, dude, this was like we're almost at the 90s now, and into the 90s and 2000s is when visual effects really started taking over.
Mhm.
So this
They
was
hadn't
like
figured it out yet here.
yeah, this was like the precursor to that. And I did have a note here that I just want to read off because I did find this interesting. So obviously this is ILM, right? And there's this guy named Dennis Muren, and he found both stop motion and optical effects to be too technically challenging, and decided that the transformation scene would be a perfect opportunity for ILM to create advances with digital morphing technology. So I think he's referring to that big monster thing, right? Or is what else?
No, there's the scene where they turn the queen, not the queen, like the wizard. That's like that little hamster when they first meet her.
Yeah, she's all going into different animals, right?
She changes into a couple animals at first, and then at the end, she changes into like it
It's
cycles through a few, and then she turns into her.
Yeah, I literally have it right here. It's next. So he proposed filming each animal and the actress doubling for Hayes, who's the wizard or whatever, and then feeding the images into a computer program developed by a guy named Doug Smythe. The program would then create a smooth transition from one stage to another before outputting the result back onto film. Smythe began development of the necessary software in 87. By 88, he and the fellow designer David Allen achieved what would represent a breakthrough for computer-generated imagery. The techniques developed for this sequence were later utilized by ILM for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. So while maybe this movie, didn't quite nail it, they were developing effects for, the movie that would later be perfected by better movies, right? So it's interesting what often happens with films where usually one movie has to kind of be the sacrificial lamb and like be the one to kind of take one for the team and figure shit out, so that the next guy can be like, oh, okay, you were doing this. That's a cool idea. You kind of fucked it up, though. We're going to do it, and we're going to do it better. And then they do it a little better, and then they do it a little better. and it creates this sort of domino effect. And ILM, obviously, I'm not surprised. Those guys were they're pioneers. Those guys. So
I'm glad you mentioned that because I totally forgot about that part. But it's interesting thinking again, like in terms of practical effects, like that scene. While the tech was groundbreaking, and while at the time, like that was like a very like a crazy effect to pull off. You go back and look at that now, and you're like, meh, like whatever. But when you go back and watch like the transformation scene in American Werewolf in London, or you watch a bunch of the scenes from like 2001: A Space Odyssey, like those look great. Like those are crazy practical effects that they pulled off then that still now look fucking great.
yeah,
And there's just like there's just something very interesting about that dynamic. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, dude. Like, I almost feel like it's because they started messing around with all the visual effects and the post of production shit that things almost went like 80s, 80s, 80s. Everything looks dope. Everything's real. Hit the late 80s and we kind of plateau a little bit and maybe even go down because like we're experimenting with shit that we don't really know all about yet. And the effects are like so. And only into like the late 90s and the 2000s did we really start to like figure shit out with things like Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings, which by all accounts have aged pretty damn good. But there's that weird spot between the 90s and the 2000s where we almost like went backwards a little bit in the process of going forwards, if that makes sense.
I feel like that's like growing pains, and we'll see this with the last movie, and you see it in Willow, but there's growing pains in like trying to use new stuff where you're like, eventually this could get us something. We think this is get us something better than what we have now, but we're just not exactly sure how to do it yet. And so you got to go through those cycles of just trial and error.
Yeah, someone had to pioneer it in order to get to where we are now. All right. So I guess that's mostly Willow. We'll run through our banners here. I feel like there's got to be some matte paintings in here. Definitely, right?
There are especially when they're like traveling. There's a few shots where they're like in these real big locations. They're really good. You don't notice that they're there. They're like on horseback riding through some canyons and stuff.
The best ones are often you don't even notice them.
Yep. And there's a shot of I think the castle in this too, where it's like all spooky and stuff. And there's a big matte painting of the castle.
Okay. Animatronics?
Possibly not actually.
Yeah, I can't recall. Definitely some prosthetics going on. I want to say there's definitely some stop motion going on with that big two-headed dragon thing, right? That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know about forced perspective, but there's those little dudes who are keyed in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They were doing something different by that point, I think.
That feels like they were like thought that they could do something else with those and like couldn't pull off what they wanted to, and kind of like those really feel like they're crammed in there. They're kind of funny though.
They don't look the best. They kind of have like this. Their silhouette is kind of it's like the police cutout or the chalk outline of a crime scene.
Yeah,
it's like
the backgrounds are super blurry. They have like this really weird, super shallow depth of field that none of the rest of the movie has. So you can like really you see them and it seems like a totally different shot.
Yeah, the effect is not super convincing, but they were still figuring it out. Is there any miniature? Is there like some miniatures of like, because mostly I think of miniatures and it's like establishing shots of like massive castles and like shit like that. But you can also achieve that through matte painting. So it's mostly miniatures when they're like those environments are being affected in some way, whether either they're blowing them up or or they have to have like somebody interacting with them. So there may not. I don't think there's miniatures in this one.
No.
And then there's definitely some pyrotechnics in the big war battle at the end, right?
Yep.
There's like cannons and shit going off, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And then obviously everything is on a real set,
Yep.
which we love to see. All right, man. We're in the home stretch here. Talking about our last movie of the night. We skip ahead 10 years
Mm.
to 1999 when shit was really popping off, and we are talking about Alice in Wonderland from 1999.
So this is an interesting one. This is a movie that I actually can't remember when I saw this first. I have no idea how I came across this first. Been something I was always just like aware of. It is a very strange made-for-TV film with a stacked cast.
Yeah, it's a great cast.
Yeah, it's a crazy cast. And a very mixed bag of effects. A very mixed bag overall. But yeah, I think this one is interesting because this is very, again, like transitional point from trying to do a lot more with visual effects and with CGI. And I think the movie is actually worse for trying to include those elements. And it's weird because there's like, so everybody knows the story of Alice in Wonderland, right? You know the gist. And this kind of just like follows that in its own order. And it's weird.
This movie's also Through the Looking Glass as well,
Oh,
which
I was
is like
there.
which is like another Lewis Carroll. It might be, I don't remember if it's supposed to be set before or after or during Alice in Wonderland, but that's also why this movie is like 2.5 hours, because it's telling like both of those stories.
Dude,
which is important. Which is important to keep in mind. And
Movie's
you say it makes it worse. I don't know that I'd necessarily agree with that. I think it gives it its own charm, and
Yeah.
it makes it what it is. And yeah, it's just the time that it was made. You know.
Yeah, it's like so weird because it's like when I think, especially a lot of times I think of CGI and I think of them being like, oh, we want to make something that looks more realistic than we could do with like props or with some sort of practical effect. But then they have shots in here like the rabbit is like they didn't even try to make it seem like a real person or anything at all. Like he's clearly like like it's not even like a great costume. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, the
like,
rabbit doesn't look very good.
it's like a really cheap costume. And so it's
Yeah.
just like weird that they made that choice, but then like there's like a griffin later, and the griffin is like pretty good as far as a costume goes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
movies all over the place.
I'll take this time right here to say that this is a TV movie, which means that obviously we all know TV movies don't have the same budget as a big theatrical film, right? The visual effects were handled by a company called Framestore, and they're a London-based visual effects company. So this was a very British production. Framestore was responsible for the special digital effects, which included 875 effects shots in total. So they did all the visual stuff, and then Jim Henson's Creature Shop is responsible for the animatronic puppet designs and all that stuff. And then Hallmark Entertainment guru Robert Halmy Sr. was responsible for the state-of-the-art film technique. I'm not sure what that's actually in reference to, but so he was basically there's three kind of pillars here. This company Framestore, Jim Henson, and then this guy Robert Halmy. So again, just kind of furthering that idea that, you know, it takes a lot for this stuff to come together the way that it does. There's a lot of people involved, and they're all performing different roles, right? So this is interesting to kind of close on, because this is the first one where there's a whole visual effects suite of shots, and it's all being juxtaposed with the practical stuff. So you're getting both in this movie. And you know, I'll pass it off to you here, and you can kind of weigh in on how well you, or how not well you think that was handled.
Well, I really like all the practical stuff, and when I think of the movie, this is the first time I'd watched it in like 7 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of the movie, like that's what I think of. I think of like the scene, even like the caucus race where they're like running around, and there's like definitely some visual effects added into that as well. But like a lot of that set is just like huge books that are real. I think of like all of the crazy makeup. I think of her getting real big and being stuck in that house. Can you hear me still? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think of a lot of that stuff, and then I don't know what it is like this. When I think of the scene with the baby, that I kind of hate that scene, but it's like so dark, and the lady's like floating around the room with the baby, like the fake prosthetic baby that's sneezing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then and also just if anybody hasn't seen this, this is like Tina Majorino. This is like one of her first things when she's like a young teenager. Most known for her role in as Deb in Napoleon Dynamite. But then this also has Whoopi Goldberg, Martin Short, Gene Wilder, Ben Kingsley.
It also has Christopher Lloyd, Miranda Richardson, who plays Rita Skeeter in Harry P. She plays the Queen of Hearts, and then Robbie Coltrane is one of the Tweedle brothers, and he is he's Hagrid, isn't he? Yeah, he's Hagrid. Yeah. So like very British cast, obviously. That's the whole London-based sort of thing. Yo, it's Kent.
Yo, what's good, Kent?
What up, dog? How you doing, bro?
So this was your first time watching this. Give me your
R.I.P. King.
Yo, for real.
Yo, we got Kent and Eric in here.
Let's go.
It's the boys. Dude, yeah, this movie. First of all, I was looking it up, and I was looking at all the different Alice in Wonderland movies. Man, they've made this thing like 6 or 7 times throughout history.
Oh, but yeah,
there are so many, bro.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, which I found fascinating. It almost made me want to watch them all and kind of see how they compare. Because I think the first one is like mad old, bro. Like
super weird.
There's one from
black and white.
There's one from 51. There's one from 33. Whoa. There's one from 1915. I think that's the first one. Like they made this thing like every 10 or 15 years.
That's crazy.
But anyway, I was into it, and then the pacing of this is rough, man.
Dude, the pacing's bad, man.
It's because of the TV movie aspect to it. Because this thing was meant to fill airtime, and it was meant to be watched with commercials. But when you don't do that, you don't have those like natural breaks, and it's just kind of like Alice meets someone, and she has this whole kooky interaction with them, and then she goes somewhere else, and then you never see that person again, and then she has another kooky interaction with these people, and it's like you just kind of do that for the whole movie, bit more or less. But I still enjoyed it, and it was basically almost, it was exactly what I was expecting it to be, which is this sort of it's this oddity, it's a curiosity, it's a relic of a certain time. Excuse me. And I enjoyed it for what it was, man. I really did. I was into what the movie was doing, for sure. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think I probably wouldn't watch it again, just because the length is like prohibitively long.
Yeah.
But I especially liked the ending when she finally like gets over her fear of singing. I don't know why, but I can't remember that from any other like Alice in Wonderland. That's like a recurring thing, I'm imagining, right?
Dude, I have no idea. I don't think I've ever seen any of the other Alice in Wonderlands all the way through. Like I've never seen the Disney one all the way through.
Dude, I'm looking at screenshots from the 1951 or 1915 one, and it looks fucking creepy, dude.
Let me see.
It looks creepy as shit. Anyway,
A bunch of this one is like weirdly dark too. Oh yes, I have seen screenshots of this.
the 1915.
Yep, fuck that.
Yeah, it's like the weird ass bunny suit
Yeah.
is there's something about an old ass picture of a guy in a bunny suit from the turn of the century that's just terrifying.
Yeah. A lot of this is like weirdly dark, which I also like about it because it's just strange. And there's a good. I was watching a behind the scenes thing. And there's a good quote where they're talking to Gene Wilder. I love that scene, the soup scene, for that just like really does it for me for whatever reason. I just love Gene Wilder, and he said that you have to like really, let's see. He said to actually do scenes on blue screen is very difficult. It's so technical. You got to have razor sharp concentration. And so I guess he just like, because of the types of movies he does, maybe he hadn't really spent much time having to do things like he plays this little turtle. So he had to do like his whole scene by himself in this huge blue screen room. And yeah, like you can just like he kills it, but there's definitely a lot of that where some of the movie just feels pretty disjointed because they were trying to combine like newer green screen, blue screen shots with weird physical practical effects. And yeah, it is very charming though.
Yeah, this would have been towards like the end of his career. So I would imagine this would have been a far cry from a lot of what he was used to.
Yeah.
Which you see that a lot too. You see that with like Ian McKellen when he did the Lord of the Rings movies, and all of that was very, very practical, very limited amount of like blue screen and stuff. And then he came back to do the Hobbit movies.
Oh, yes.
And the production of those was vastly different than the Lord of the Rings. And he was like tearing his hair out, like he was like torture. He hated it.
I watched that scene where he was like in the room by himself trying to do like the
like, you
kitchen
know exactly what I'm
scene.
talking about. Yeah, dude. I mean, yeah. So it's just very interesting. This movie, not so much the movie itself, but just kind of what it represents. It's just like that paradigm shift of like, this is where we're headed, and you saw it even with something like a TV movie, you know, where like it's just Alice in Wonderland. Like nobody was really, I don't want to downplay it, but it's not like this thing was like had a ton of expectations behind it or anything like that, and it like. You know, if it didn't work, then it was like no big deal. You know, it's just they've made 6 of these already. You know what I mean? So it almost feels like they used this like evergreen thing. Alice in Wonderland is like considered, you know, timeless.
Yeah.
It's evergreen. So they're like, let's take that. That would be a great you know, vehicle for us to test out all these crazy effects, because you know the technology is getting there, and this is a ripe thing because you know because of the material, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different crazy effects. So that's kind of just like my theory, you know, that they were like, let's use this as a way to kind of flex our muscles and like see where the technology's at, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Alice in Wonderland, man. Let's run through our list. Unless you have any final thoughts for us.
No, I do think this is worth a watch for people. Though maybe break it up into a couple viewings or something. I feel like the Christopher Lloyd scene and the Tweedledee Tweedledum scenes could just be completely cut from the film.
Yeah, I mean, but this is like I said, since this is like a TV movie, they're doing the opposite of cutting, where they're just like,
dude,
we got to cram as much shit into this thing as we can to fill our time slot.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
Yeah.
Do you recall any matte paintings?
Maybe with some of the earlier shots of when you're seeing the garden, but she's not actually in the garden yet.
Okay.
And background there, yeah, I'm sure there is somewhere, honestly.
I would be surprised if there wasn't. Definitely animatronics, right? With like the griffin and stuff. The
griffin might be I'm not sure if that's an animatronic or a person. Definitely the baby is an animatronic.
Okay.
Fuck that, fuck the baby.
Lots of prosthetics.
For sure.
Is there stop motion?
Yes. Oh, I don't know.
Can't really remember.
Maybe not actually.
This movie's like a blur for me. I
Mhm.
was a little baked when we watched it.
Hmm.
When I watched it, to be fair.
Force perspective, there definitely is. I know they use it for when they're in the garden and they're playing like croquet, and you can see there's like all those long archways, and you can like see really far down. That's actually a series of like it's only like 4 or 5, and they get progressively smaller. And so like how they set them up and then film that makes it look like it's like a really long, essentially like infinite series of archways, but it just a forced perspective shot is really cool. Yeah.
Nice. Miniatures. There might not be miniatures. I don't think the production was big enough to perhaps warrant any. And there's not like a ton of like big exterior shots or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any pyrotechnics either, really. Not any like explosions or people on fire in this movie.
Every action. Maybe there might be, if there is anywhere, it's with the scene with Martin Short where he's singing. I feel like there like some crazy stuff happens on the table. That could all be digital though.
Dude, his head is mad weird looking.
Yeah, dude.
The Mad Hatter. That was super accurate to the source material. They wanted to really make sure they did that.
Yeah, and other thing, just quick aside, everybody, like as much shit as I have talked on this and as weird as the film is, everybody's like really going for it. Like all of the I feel like all of the actors are like really like everybody's fucking super locked in, and yeah, the performances are actually like really strong.
Yeah, it's a lot of British actors, and they're like even at this point they were considered like pretty like esteemed actors. And I think they're pretty known for just generally like taking things more seriously. I think they're more involved in like the theater and stuff. So
yeah, it's definitely very theatrical.
And this is a very theatrical production. It's very much like kind of one location for a lot of the scenes, and a lot of like just people talking. There's effects going on amidst the conversations, but it's very talky in that sense. So yeah, and then there's obviously lots of practical sets, which we always love to see. So I'll just open it up to anyone in the chat watching at this point that before we wrap, if there's any movies from any time that feature your favorite usages of practical effects, shout them out real quick, and we can give our thoughts on them before we close this thing out. So Tyler, what have we learned today, man? What can audiences take away from all this?
I think practical effects pretty sick when done correctly. I feel like they age better than most things. I feel like that idea of a practical effect, like relying on just like basic camera stuff and just like human ingenuity, of like them like in 2001 of them like taping like this like gigantic monolith of a film, and they're like, yeah, we taped a pen to a piece of glass. Like it is very interesting how much you can achieve through doing something that's technically really simple, but just having to be creative in how you do it. For me, a lot of this too was like interesting to think about, and this is kind of a separate conversation, but the going from practical effects to CGI, and now we're in this world where we're going from like CGI and effects to like AI stuff, and like I think that there's learnings that we can take from this period to this period that we're going to be going into. Yeah, just like being able to like digitally add something is not always better. I think too, like we constantly underestimate how perceptive people are. I think we're like very innately much more sensitive to like uncanniness.
It's that uncanny valley effect, like where we can pick it, and that's what makes practical effects work better, is because there's nothing out of place for our brains to highlight, to fixate on, and therefore
Yep.
take us out of the movie.
Yeah. So even if it's like a dude in a suit where you're clearly like, this is a guy in a suit, there's something about that your brain is like digest, and it's like, okay, like I get that, I can buy into that. I'm in this world, and I'm fine with that. And you kind of lose some of that. Oh yeah, obviously the thing.
Yeah, can't we weren't really, I mean, everyone talks about the thing. The thing is like the crown jewel of practical effects, right? So we wanted to kind of shout out some other movies like The Fly and Day of the Dead that maybe don't get as much shine. But obviously the thing, the work that Rob Bottin did on that movie is phenomenal. And I think he was like 23.
Dude, he was hospitalized after that for a while.
Yeah,
he said he was living off of soda and candy bars.
yeah, the stress of it fucked him up for sure. Because
Yeah.
I think he was put, if I'm not, didn't he like come in and replace somebody else or something like that?
Maybe actually either that or
I
on
might
like
be-
the next movie he was like something happened with that movie or the next movie and he got replaced or somebody else. He went left to do something bigger and somebody. You might be right actually.
I might be thinking of Return of the Living Dead, but
No, because that sounds familiar to me too. Like somebody got like a break like that because they were supposed to be like an assistant or something, and then the main dude left, and then he was like, "Yeah, I can just do it," and like killed it. And it might not be the thing, but
yeah,
forget. Rings a bell though.
but yeah, Kent hits the nail on the head again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. Dude, I watched it in theaters in January again. I watched it in theaters for the second time. It was awesome.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters like 3 or 4 years ago when it was out.
And it's incredible what they were willing to do for just one shot in a movie.
Dude, yeah.
I think of the video you sent me of the behind the scenes for The Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing the forced perspective stuff, but it's like it's more dynamic where it's not just like, oh, this person's big and this person's small. Like it's two people interacting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And like they had to make like all the props they had to make two of them, one big and one small. Like, do you remember? Can you remember this stuff?
Yeah.
Can you perhaps explain it better for the people watching still?
Yeah, the main thing and the scene that people always like point to and like how they did the crazy forced perspective in Lord of the Rings is Gandalf and oh my god and Elijah Wood are in the kitchen together, and they wanted to do this forced perspective shot, but they wanted it to be dynamic, so they wanted to be able to move the camera like you would in like a nice,
yes, because once you
shot.
That's it, because if you move the camera, the effect is ruined.
You break the whole thing. So they were like, okay, what if we also created the set so the set pieces of the set could move, and then we can time it, like set everything up to like a computer, and then the pieces of the set will move in conjunction with the camera moving, and we'll keep our forced perspective. So they like have it looks like it's a long table that they're sitting at, but it's actually like broken into pieces, and Elijah Wood is like way further back on his side of the table, and Gandalf was sitting like right in front of the camera. And so then when the camera moves, like all the rest of the room, like the stuff in the room moves, and it's just like so, yeah. And it's like a minute or two, and it's like so complex, and just like the math that goes into that, and like it's really like if you look it up and you see what it actually looks like, it just seems like there's so much room for error and for that not to work.
And it might have been the first time anybody had even done that before.
Yeah, and it's crazy, and like despite them being able to like use electronics and like computer stuff to set all the camera movements so they're in conjunction. Outside of that, that's just them like being like, okay, like when you point a camera at something, if it's further, it looks smaller. If it's closer, it looks bigger. And how can we use that to our advantage? And just like it's a really simple premise that they like really took to 11, and it's fascinating, and that scene's great.
Yeah. This one, Eric said The scene where the ring falls in the snow, I'm pretty sure is a massive ring.
Just they could get like a detailed big shot.
Yeah, any close up they use
It's
is
really
just
funny.
it's crazy, man. And it's like, and it's funny because Peter Jackson also did the Hobbit movies, and like those are such a far cry. Like all the orcs are all like VFX, like motion
Dude, they
capture.
look like shit. Dude, they look so good in the original trilogy.
And
Too.
it's like I can't imagine anyone on that production who was returning. So like Orlando Bloom came back, obviously Ian McKellen, motherfucking Peter Jackson. Like imagine being on the set of The Hobbit and being like, yeah, this is not as cool as the first time we did it. Like
yeah, dude.
the shit kind of sucks now. And it's just crazy, man. It's crazy. Like the fact he got studioed. Yeah, I guess they just straight up weren't letting him do. Eric's our resident Lord of the Rings aficionado. He knows all about that shit. It's like that trilogy of movies is like a miracle of filmmaking. Just the fact that shit even happened and the way that it happened. Like obviously those movies were all filmed like back to back. Like they just straight up filmed all three of those in order. Like, dude, yeah, 438 days they took.
Dude, wow.
Like everybody just moved to New Zealand for over a year. They were like, yeah, I'm gonna be gone for mad long. Like,
they're like, I hope these hit. I hope these like turn out good because this is gonna be a whole thing.
And then it's like everything is filmed out of order. Like nothing is sequential.
Right.
Like all of that shit is broken down and like it's just crazy.
Dude, the first of any of the Lord of the Ring or Hobbits movies that I saw was the very last Hobbit film, and I saw it in theaters with you guys. And it's essentially just like a 3-hour fight scene of like all the people from, you know.
It's literally called the Battle of the Five Armies.
Yeah, dude. And so the whole time I was like, I don't know who any of these people are. Like the CGI is kind of crazy. Because I remember like the big thing at the time was that it was in like they shot stuff in like 60 frames per second. And so it had this like it has that like really weird clinical smoothness to it that's like it's not natural looking and it's not like theatrical looking. And so like that was what I was like hyper fixating on. And I was like, I don't know, I have no idea who these people are, what's going on. And
yeah, just I mean, I don't know, man. It's like it's so easy for me to definitively say like, yeah, dude, like those would never get made that way again because we literally saw what happened when they tried to make them again. And they did and that's essentially what the Hobbit movies are.
Well,
and it's not good.
Well, maybe just as like a kind of closing thought, like a good counter example of somebody who I think is like taking everything at his disposal that you have now in like, 2025 or say 2023 and doing something great with it is like Dune. Denis Villeneuve is that boy. I was watching a breakdown of like some stuff from Dune and
I did watch that video that you sent me.
Dude, yeah, so it's interesting. It's like a lot of stuff a lot of stuff is obviously done with like CGI and visual effects afterwards, but they film it in a way on set where they try to mimic as much stuff as they can, and then that forces them to just like, to put it simply, like to like change the camera settings as if they were actually filming that thing in real time. So like there's some scenes where like you can't see much because there's like a really big explosion that's like backlighting. So like all the characters are silhouetted, and there's the scene where like the Bene Gesserit ship comes down, and you can't really see the ship at all because it has these bright ass lights. And if you were actually filming that, you'd have to like your exposure would be fucked, and you wouldn't be able to see it. And so they were like, okay, like we're gonna actually film it like that. And then so when they film it like that, they do all their visual effects. And the final result very much like looks like something that's very practical and physical because that was the effect that they wanted to go for, instead of just being like, yeah, we're just gonna film everything really clean and then we'll add stuff in really clean later, and then you'll be able to see everything really good. Like, I feel like it's undeniable that you watch Dune and you're like, this feels, there's so much more texture and it feels so much more real and less clinical than like a lot of other big, similar toned movies that are out there now.
Yeah, they were saying that like the ornithopters are just helicopters, and then they like replace it with an ornithopter in post.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like they film a lot of the daylight like actually outside, like,
Mhm.
and you can tell when you watch it, and it's like they really spare no expense as far as, and that's when I think visual effects are at their best, is like when they're augmenting something that's already actually there,
Mhm.
and highlighting an actual practical effect.
Mhm.
Real quick, Eric, the goat,
Wow.
hitting me up with another super chat. Thank you so much, bro. One love.
Love you, bro.
I think of One Love from Pineapple Express. He's like, one love. Thank you so much, Eric. You're the fucking man, bro.
Thanks, dude.
We are gonna wind down here. This has been a long show. Thank you. We had some good viewership tonight. I really appreciate anyone who came and watched.
Yeah, thanks for pulling up.
Super cool of you all. Really appreciate it. You make these shows more fun than they would be without you. That's for sure. And this topic is so overwhelming. I feel it's very daunting. There's a lot of history. I tried to kind of preface our conversation with just some historical stuff, to kind of really show how far we've come and just how simple the innovations have been and always have been. So yeah, at the end of the day, Tyler and I, we love movies. I think you guys love movies, and that's why you're watching.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate you, brother. Kent, thanks for coming out for the first stream, bro.
Miss you, man.
Love you, bro. Hope you're doing well.
Do you want to say what the next one is, or do you not want to?
We can tell them. Yeah,
Are we
anyone
locked-
who's
Are we locked in for that?
Yeah. So the next show in April is going to be the folk horror episode, where I think we decided on we're going to do like 5, right?
Yeah. I don't know if we
Not-
know exactly what they are yet, but
We're going to watch 5 folk horror movies, and we're going to talk about them. And we're going to talk about what folk horror is and what makes it good, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So,
yeah.
But yeah, more on that to come. That'll be sometime in April. This has been the March episode of Talks from the Shelf. For Tyler, I'm Mark. This has been Talks from the Shelf. Take care and watch more movies, guys.